I always tell people, you're not going to take my job, and your job title might not change, but your job will grow. And it's how you hire into. If you're value driven, you'll find those right people. Carrie, when she started, it was more just like, I want to say old school, pure marketing. And now it's turned into this, her job is now morphed into this digital manager,
yes.
Millions of dollars of cash, for our budgets. That's the beauty to me of small business. So it's not, you might not get the space in the front, but you get this very robust job, and then, your salary grows with that.
Welcome to The Unconventional Path, Secrets to Igniting Your Business with Bela and Mike. I'm Bela Musitz, the David D. Ray Professor of Innovation and Entrepreneurship at Clarkson University in upstate New York.
And I'm Mike Wasserman, Professor of International Management at the University of Applied Sciences in Münster, Germany.
This podcast is about conversations with successful entrepreneurs you've never heard of, who have built successful businesses you have never heard of. Businesses and entrepreneurs that we can all identify with.
In each episode, I think we try to capture and share the essence of how interesting people often take unconventional paths to build their businesses. So we decided to interview a wide range of business people that have found and taken unconventional paths in their careers. And what we hope to do is capture some lessons, advice, inspiration that'll help you attain your entrepreneurial goals. So join us for interesting conversations and discussions with what we think are really inspiring guests on how you can ignite your business by exploring some of the many less traveled, unconventional paths that lie ahead.
Our podcast is available on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, TuneIn, Radio Public, and Acast, and probably any other podcast system where you download your podcasts from. So if you like the podcast, please tell your friends and give us a review on your favorite podcasting application. If you have suggestions or comments, we'd love to hear from you. Please send us an email at bela.and.mike@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Hello, folks. Bela here, along with Mike. Today, we have a nice interview with Nicole Snow, who runs a company called Darn Good Yarns, and it's a wonderful story. And we have some really wonderful topics that we talked with Nicole about. Particularly, I want you guys to pay attention to the notion of the way she has built a community around her business, which I think is really key and core to her success. Was there anything else that really struck out at you, Mike?
Bela, I think this notion of trust is also worth talking about. And I think the concepts of trust and community are linked. And it's been something that she's really leveraged into a unique business model. And like you said, something that's really been successful. She relies a lot on subscriptions, and she makes a lot of choices for the customers. And I think they trust her to do that. And so I think these ideas of built community, trust, and kind of a sustainable business model, sustainable in terms of long lasting, not so subject to competition or to changes in trends or tastes, is something that's going to allow her to succeed in the long run.
Yeah, I agree, Mike. Let's take a listen to Nicole's interview, and then we'll come back at the end of that to talk about this notion of building trust and community in a little more detail. But first, we'd like to thank the David D. Ray School of Business at Clarkson University for supporting this, and Mike over in the Münster School of Business at Münster University of Applied Sciences in Münster, Germany. Thank you for your support. And as always, if you have any comments or suggestions, you can reach us at bela.and.mike@gmail.com. And please, if you like what you hear, leave us a favorable review on iTunes. And now let's get into the interview with Nicole. Hello, folks. Today I'm here with Nicole Snow, who is the founder of a company called Darn Good Yarns. You might be asking yourself, what does Darn Good Yarns do? And we'll get to that in a second. But this is a great, great success story. So I thought I'd spend a little bit of time with Nicole, understanding her background, her inspiration for starting the business, and how things are going. So welcome, Nicole.
Thanks so much for having me, Bela.
Sure. So tell us a little bit about what Darn Good Yarns is and what it does.
Yeah, so everyone thinks that we sell yarn online. And while that's true, we actually have been able to grow our e-commerce business. So we're a retail e-commerce business we sell a lot of clothing and apparel, and that actually accounts for 70%, more than 70% of our revenue currently. So Darn Good Yarn is broken up into, you can think about it, 3 different categories. We have our yarn that we're selling to crafters, and we're serving a $44 billion industry there. We have a subscription-based model where we're serving about 13,000 users every single month who sign up for our yarn club. And then we have the clothing component of the business.
Wow. How long have you been in business?
We've been in business for just over 10 years.
So that's a great description, and we'll get back to that later. But let's go back to the early years. So where did you grow up?
I grew up in New Jersey, central New Jersey. Like, I'm a kid from the suburbs, so nothing too special going on there. My parents had a family business growing up.
Okay.
So there is that entrepreneurial blood in my family. They had a medical equipment business way back in the day. I remember going on service calls with my dad and going to fix wheelchairs in Mount Sinai in New York.
Okay,
Yeah.
so there is a history of entrepreneurship, business ownership within the family.
Yeah, there is.
Brothers, sisters?
I have a younger sister.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is she an entrepreneurial? Does she have the entrepreneurial gene as well?
No, I don't think so. She's working in a high school and in middle school in Manhattan.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Any small businesses when you were young? Did you?
Well, so there's this funny thing. So when I grew up, my parents, they had their medical equipment business. Prior to that, though, it was a spin-off of my grandparents' business, which was also a medical equipment business out of Staten Island. And one of the things when they closed up shop and retired, I got this old cash register. Like, this thing was hundreds of pounds. Well, at least to me, it was hundreds of pounds. So in my basement, my mom was awesome. She set up this craft area for me, so I got to craft, and then I had my little cash register. So from an early age, I would sell my crafts to myself, and I think that was actually the basis of Darn Good Yarn. Being around my parents' business and then having that very weird playroom setup, that sort of sparked me to say, okay, how can I maybe start other business? Like, it was just very natural for me. When I was in college, I went to school at Clarkson, and I was one of the only freshmen at the time to have a car. I don't know what the parking situation is like there now, but as freshmen, you couldn't have a car unless you were in ROTC, so you can go downtown each week. So I wound up starting a small little business where I went to the local Walmart, which was at that time like 30, 40 minutes away. And I would bring back Betta Fish and little fish tanks, and I would let people customize their Betta Fish for their dorm rooms. And I made great money with that.
Wow. So you clearly have this entrepreneurial gene that's turned on, and you did it first in the basement, making things for yourself and then selling them to yourself.
Myself. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. And then there was a period of time, I remember my kids had Betta Fish too. So there was this sort of Betta Fish craze for a little while.
Yeah. I've always had a fish tank in my life. And people were like, hey, can you drive me to Messina and go get fish? And I'm like, you know what, why don't I bring them back to you? Because I didn't want people in my car anyway.
Sure.
And I figured, if I could sell 20, 30, 50, that's what I wound up doing. So I just would bring them around, and that was my gig.
And your major at Clarkson was?
I was business. I think the technical is business and technology management.
Okay.
That was a long one. But I graduated with honors, so that works.
That's wonderful. Congratulations. Yeah. And then what happened after graduation?
I went in active duty Air Force. So I went through ROTC. I got commissioned as a second lieutenant, and I was a contract officer. And what that was is I was helping write the contracts between the Air Force and small businesses. So anything under $100,000 was what I was doing. So if it was mowing lawns or buying add-ons for rifles for the military police, that was my specialty.
So you got great expertise in reviewing and writing contracts.
Yes. Too much. That acquisition rules, that was a very thick book.
Right.
Yeah.
And you did that for how many years?
I did that for 2 years. I got out early. Just personally, I realized that I had some depression issues going on. My parents wound up getting divorced. So, I think
stuff happens.
Stuff happens. And I was, you're in your early 20s. And I don't feel like I had necessarily the best network in the military. I think being a woman and where I was in the military, there weren't a lot of other military. It was a lot of civilian jobs around what I did.
I see. So
the mentorship was very fragmented. There's a lot of other places in the military where the mentorship is very strong, but my position sort of fell through the cracks. So it's just not the best situation. So at that point, I think that one of the, I don't know if it's an entrepreneurial trait, but one of the things that I feel helped me was I was able to say, okay, this was an area of concern in my life. So it's depression, anxiety, in your early 20s. And it's so common. Like, as I was very open with it, even with like my own troops. I'm like, this is what I'm going through. And I think from like that point, like just being transparent, I don't know what made me do it, but I realized that was such an empowering lesson to learn, that even now, like with my team here, being transparent about whatever we're doing, if we're going to be making a move or whatever, having that keeps everyone on the same page. So you're not like, what's going on behind closed doors? And I think that's part of our success here. But going back to that, saying, okay, I'm going to use this as a learning point, to build myself up, to learn about who I am as an individual, what really makes me tick, and then use that to grow. So when I got out of the military, I got married, and like, you're still kind of wobbly. It was a profession change. It wasn't even a job change. I mean, like, I went through 4 years of college. I had done junior ROTC prior to that in high school. So I've been part of the military schema for.
Do you have a history of the military service in your family?
No, I mean, my grandfather's served for like minimal enlistment time, but there's no professional military folks. It really rocked my world. So I got out of the military. I got married to another Clarkson alum, and he worked for Raytheon at the time, and they gave him the opportunity to travel. And I was like, right at the same time, I was like, oh, let me maybe start like a cool online hippie shop, like just go completely the other way of the military and sell Tibet prayer flags online. And it was those two things happening where his job took us and was moving us like every 6 months almost. Like, as I sit here now, I've moved 15 times in my marriage, and we've been married for 13 years. So we had a very high frequency of moves going on. So I started this small little weird import business, and I learned how to code my own website. And that just sort of morphed into what Darn Good Yarn is now. In the beginning, it was more of a hodgepodge. Like, I didn't really have like my business chops going on. I'm like, let me just sort of import stuff that I like and see how it goes. And I made a couple sales and cool. And then as that grew, like I'd say over 2 years, I did some trade shows and I did get like a little bit more educated. I saw this opportunity for the yarn, like, and it was still based off of something that I wanted to do, which was learn how to knit. But I just used all these supply networks that I already had put in place.
Right. So it wasn't like one day you're sitting down and you had this idea, I'm going to start this company called Darn Good Yarns.
No.
It was a little thing that you started, and as you went along, you learned and got smarter.
Yes.
Right. And I think that's one of the things that some people struggle with is when do you step off the curb and when do you actually start versus just thinking about it.
Yeah. I mean, since it's mostly like entrepreneurs that are your listeners, for me, I joke about that first little 2-year business as my Fisher Price business. You still have your training wheels on and, you make mistakes and you do everything, and it wasn't until I got to Darn Good Yarn and that started to grow. Then you go, okay, that whole idea of working on your business, not in your business, and delegating things off. So, but I feel almost like you have to go through that. Like you have to learn a little bit of it so that when you're working with contractors, like how to do photography, so that at least you're having the correct conversations with those folks that you outsource to.
Right. So that was morphed into Darn Good Yarns.
Yes.
So when did Darn Good Yarns officially start?
That was in April of 2008.
Okay.
Yeah. A great time in our economy.
So 10 years.
Yes.
Excellent. And at first, what were the first things you were selling?
So originally it was recycled silk yarn right from the start. I remember like one of my first imports were, it was 50 balls of yarn. And I'm like, well, if I don't sell it, I guess people are getting recycled silk scarves that I knit for a long time after this. And then what happened, and it's a very unique situation, but when I went to reorder, the lead time like increased by a couple months. And I'm like, hey, what's going on here? And I'm talking to my suppliers and they said, these women, they're hand spinning this, but that was they're working around their harvest season. So this is sort of a part-time gig. And then and I was just learning about the women actually creating the yarns. And I said, I looked at a couple of other companies that were selling this online at the time. I think there may be 2 or 3 others. And I'm like, their websites aren't that great. Like, I know that I can do a better job telling their story and potentially create just sustainable employment doing this one thing year round. Because I'm like, these are moms. I mean, they're moms, they're wives. They're like, if they're going through what I'm going through, and because I was working around and morphing around my husband's schedule, that's tough to do. If I can try to maybe smooth that out for them, that could be really significant.
Right. So let's talk a little bit more about your suppliers, because you're not buying your stuff from large factories in China, right? So let's
No.
just explain that a little bit more, because I think that's a unique part of your story.
Yeah, when I first started, I had maybe 2 or 3 suppliers, and they're small business owners in India and Nepal, and they're working with and setting up co-ops in their local areas to teach women who are really, I don't want to say forgotten about, but in terms of gender and caste discrimination that happen in these countries, they just don't have the same opportunities. And I'm not going and trying to rework anyone's culture. I'm trying to work within that framework to say these people are living on less than $2 a day. These are the people that are truly living in poverty and that don't have the social nets. Like, we're very lucky in our country. We have there's ways to be taken care of. In these places, it's not really there in the same way. So I found other business owners that shared the same tenets as I did, but they were in India and I was here. So we worked together to say, okay, how can we continue to grow these product lines and keep the quality good? And the thing that I think makes us very unique, and I don't think a lot of people realize about our business, is that we purposely purchase in smaller batches on a very frequent basis versus, 1 or 2 humongous orders every single year. Because that ensures not only great quality, but it also ensures that our fair work conditions are maintained as well.
So how do you find your suppliers? It sounds like you have to get on an airplane and go to Nepal.
We don't, actually. So originally, I was lucky. This first Fisher Price business, I wound up, wasn't a partner. She was just growing her business at the same time, and she was Indian and was part of, her family were manufacturers in Delhi. So I had a very unique insight into the wholesale world in India, just from someone with no background whatsoever in it. So I got a lot of my initial contacts there from her traveling, and I was able to piggyback on that. And then as we've moved forward, I do have buyers over there now that go in and vet any of our new suppliers as we've grown our product lines, because that's been one of our, I don't want to say secret sauce, but that's really what we've done in the past year. So they go in, we have Skype calls with them, video conferencing, and then there's a whole questionnaire list that my ops manager put together that we make sure that our tenants are just being met and that we're on the same playing field.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's fabulous. How many different products do you sell right now? How many SKUs do you have?
Oh, boy. That's a great question. I think we're around, because we have different colors. So in terms of SKUs, I say we're around 1,000 units, different SKUs right now.
And of those 1,000 different products, how many different suppliers is that?
A little over 50.
What's the average sort of customer order size?
So to go back to the sort of 3 different pillars
Yes.
of Darn Good Yarn, right? So we have our skirt customer. They're usually ordering 5 skirts, because it's one thing to lump it all together and I can give you an AOV, and it's meaningless. So with that set, that's around $130 order generally. And then for our yarn club, that's the 13,000 folks a month that are on that plan. That sells for $10 plus shipping every month. And then for our yarn itself, that's actually fluctuating. I think it's a little bit on an uptrend of around, they're getting usually 1 to 2 items, but they're kits, where in the past they were just getting onesie, twosie balls of yarn. And I think what we've done is a huge investment in the past 6 months to work with micro-influencers on Instagram and have them start to create patterns for us using our yarn to really show people how and showcase how to use the yarn exactly. Our yarns are atypical. You're not going to find them in Walmart. So if someone who's been a traditional crafter and they're looking to step out and maybe step up their game a little bit, it's a very common feedback when I would go to trade shows is, this stuff is so beautiful, I have no idea what to do with it. Okay, but now using the micro-influencer base and people who are crafting and designing their own patterns, they're happy to sell their design work to us so that we can share that with our audience.
I see. So you said, I'm not going to let this one get by. Yarn Club, 13,000 people in a yarn club?
Yes.
So talk a little bit more about that.
One of the things that makes Darn Good Yarn, I have to back up a little bit. So Darn Good Yarn, I think what makes us really unique is that we've created an environment where we allow failure. And in that, we say, let's just test things quickly, and then we're going to patch it together along the way. So Yarn Club kind of started off, I don't want to say as a joke, but we said, all right, let's maybe see if we can do a $10 club. Very difficult to do anyway, just because it's $10. So what can you really get in a box for $10? And
so the idea is $10 a month, and once a month I get a package and it's a surprise.
Yes. And so every month it's you get a ball of our recycled silk yarn, and then you get a pattern. It's a knit and crochet pattern. So it's actually 2 patterns, and then you get a little gift with it as well. So
it's like a book of the month club.
It is, yeah. And so you think for $10 though, like there's a lot of design work that has to go in there. So, Carrie and I, who's my marketing manager, we said, okay, if we can get 100 people on here, maybe that's proof of concept. Like, I don't even think we use that sexy of language. We're like, let's just hope if we can get 100 people on here, that would be cool. We could pay for at least someone's salary for a couple of weeks. And it just blossomed like right in front of us, because we've had this yarn club for just under 2 years now, because we started December 2016. So we were just able to scale and grow that via Facebook, and then our other residual like digital channels.
So all your business is, you don't have a retail store?
No.
Right? It's all online?
I
It's
used
all
to,
internet?
but not anymore.
Yeah. So does that make it easier for you to do these types of experiments?
Yes.
Right? And test the market, right? So that's one of the great opportunities of being in the online world.
Yes.
is you can sort of do an experiment, see how it goes,
Yes.
modify it, change it, and run from there.
Almost instantly. And when I see even like other yarn stores, because we do a little bit of wholesale, and I'm like, if you're not online, like it's difficult to, and how do you capture that data coming into your store of what and why people are buying? Interestingly though, when I first started selling online, I got a lot of pushback that people will never buy yarn online, because people have to see it and feel it and touch it and smell it. Like the first thing people do is they always smell the yarn, which is, it's just a yarn person thing, I guess. I do the same thing, so I'm guilty. But, you push through that. And I think one of the things that makes us so strong is that being a small business, we care so much about our customers. And in terms of the customer experience, that if they get something that they're not pleased with, we're very flexible. We're willing to hold your hand and make an exchange happen, or, work that all out so that it takes a lot of that fear away. And our reviews reflect that. I mean, we have thousands and thousands of 5-star reviews. And a lot of them are based on the awesome customer service we provide.
Yeah, I think one of the things that sometimes people miss in business is if you're selling a 6-pack of Pepsi, everybody knows what that is, and they're willing to buy it from anybody. Mm-hmm. Whereas you're selling things that are very sort of personal, right? Like you said, yes. People want to touch it, they want to feel it, because they're going to make something out of it, yes. Or they're going to wear it,
yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's very personal to them. And so selling that online, I think, puts you in a different emotional category.
It does.
Than selling Pepsi or Coke.
Right.
And so you have to make sure you address those concerns of your customers in a thoughtful way that builds their trust.
Yes. And I would tell you that, in the world of outsourcing, and, that's like the word du jour. You can't like really listen to an entrepreneurial podcast without hearing outsourcing. I think one of the things that made us special, like people say 10 years, the first 5 of those years, I was doing everything at the company. So in terms of customer service, I was hearing firsthand what those concerns were, or why people were making things. And you're exactly right. How precious those items that they're making are. That carried through, and so that we have respect every time that yarn order goes out, especially. I mean, all of our orders get a lot of respect, but there's a huge value add when someone gets our yarn and they're going to sit there for a few hours now and make something for someone else. We have to have a high level of respect for that process, that, the hours that they're putting into it, that's important to us, right, that they have a good experience.
How many employees do you have?
Oh, right now. Are we at 12?
Approximately.
Yeah, I think we're at 12 right now.
Okay.
We just had a nice little round of hiring here in the last few weeks, so we've brought on 4 new people.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is this a seasonal business?
Originally, it was a seasonal business. So if people aren't really knitting in the, except for the hardcore folks, they're not knitting in the summer. I brought on the skirts originally to help smooth out our sales, and that wound up just being its own very robust part of the business, luckily. So yeah, there is some cycle with the yarn itself, but mm-hmm. We've brought on other complementary product lines to help smooth that out, and then be that go-to brand for people who just want to be creative. So if they're not knitting right now, because I just always try to put myself in the customer's shoes. If you're a busy mom, like it's not always the time and season to sit down and knit. So what are some other ways that we can infuse our values into other product lines and bring that on board for them? Because we've established trust with our customers.
Right. And so do you have customers that buy all 3 of your product lines?
Yes, we do. We do.
Right. So that's actually probably a great way. You develop trust in one, and then you can branch them into another.
Yeah, I think like in the business world, that funnel idea, everything's a funnel. I've always gone like, I don't like that. It feels like a little dirty to me. Like, oh, pushing a customer through a funnel. Like, I don't know. I didn't like it. And it's sort of been pushing around in my head. And I'm like, one day I'm like, you know what? It's just the customer journey. Like, this is their experience, because they're maybe doing back to school right now. And then what's happening, maybe in February is different. And we're nimble enough as a small business to serve this customer and take them on this journey. The idea is that we want them to feel awesome when they're wearing one of our skirts or knitting with our yarn, and then linking them back to our value-based supply chain. How do we just sort of lead them on that? That's why they're coming to us. And once we started to think about the customer journey, it was like, okay, this is cool. Now we're like a tour guide. Now we're just the conduit for this person to have this experience.
Right. And how do you do your fulfillment?
Yeah, our fulfillment is done in-house right now. So we just moved into an awesome warehouse in central New York, and where everything is in-house, with the exception of part of our subscription boxes. So we are contracted with Albany ARC, and they help give jobs to adults with developmental disabilities. And they've been awesome for us in terms of just assembling our boxes, getting them out in a really quick timeline. And any business owners out there that like aren't familiar with the ARC agencies, they're almost everywhere. And it's just a matter of, because they don't have huge marketing budgets to reach out to small business owners. Yes. You have to sort of find them on your own. But in terms of what we've been able to do with our business, I wouldn't have been able to scale my subscription boxes without them in terms of assembly. Like, the capital that I would have needed to just hire my own employees versus the pay structure that we were able to work out just made that possible, and being able to be self-funded, yes. that was important to us.
And that's the subscription service that you have 13,000?
Yes.
So they're shipping 13,000 packages a month?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. And we have plans right now to launch, well, we've already launched them. We've done soft launches on 4 other subscription boxes, a fabric, a bead. We're going to be doing a kids craft one, and then sort of an add-on to a sewing with the fabric, and scaling those in the same way. So we figure if we can just get another 4 in, it's going to round us out and create a very sustainable business.
So have you had any duds?
Yeah, we have actually. I think in this conquest for this lifestyle brand, you sort of lose track of why you're in business. And we've had some product lines that we brought on just because we're like, who wouldn't want a coffee cup or things like that? Yes. And then it was like originally a head scratch, like, oh, why isn't this selling? But then we realized we're the conduit to have these people go on this journey that's linked back to our supply chain. We lost track of that. It was a squirrel, and we're like, okay, let's go chase that squirrel. So you come back, and I can tell you every time we chase that squirrel, that product never works for us. So it's just coming back to what makes us special.
So how do you think about hiring people, right? One of the challenges, you start a business, it's just you.
Yeah.
So it's you in the basement, right?
Yes.
And you're doing everything. And then at some point in time, you run out of cycles. And you say, I have to go find someone to help me and join me. How do you think about that process? How do you find that special person?
Like when I first did it, my first hire was a customer of mine, actually. She was a wholesale client, just looking for part-time work. So she worked as a virtual assistant for me. And that served a great purpose. She was really into the brand. And as we grew, things just don't work out. You move on to the next place. What I can tell you in terms of my lessons learned, that I've found that at least in the digital space and e-commerce space, things do tend to move pretty quickly. The attitude and nimbleness of a person just mentally is more valuable to me than what's actually on their resume. That I can have someone who has an amazing resume, but if they're slow to move and don't like change and they're not entrepreneurial, they're not going to work here. And that's one thing I always say in my interviews. People who thrive here in this environment are entrepreneurial. We've set up the business, we have profit share, we have a pension plan. I've tried to create an environment that allows people to almost be like a mini business owner within our ecosystem at Darn Good Yarn.
Do you have a particular process you go through for hiring people?
So my new upgraded Darn Good Yarn process, we just hired an HR consultant agency, which I wish I did this years ago. I was doing it all on my own. So I would go on Indeed or even Craigslist in some cases to go find applicants, and I was vetting them all myself. And it was a time suck for me. I wound up hiring on an HR company. I mean, they've gotten us into compliance because we start to get larger. You better have your employee handbook, and it. Yes, there are agencies out there that will just give you a boilerplate. That's fine. And it only works if you use it. For us, we're so culture driven, and where we've had misfires in terms of, bad hires, and it costs us so much money. It's not just losing, it's the training that goes into it. And once I start to really see the true cost, not only on, not the bottom line, but even just how many times I have to ask my management to retrain someone, they have their own things to do.
Right.
And when I start to see that picture, I'm like, oh man, we have to stop this right now. And hiring on this agency, and then helping, they understood that culture was so important. So they helped me hire and interview people in a way that was more values based than we ever have been.
Right.
It's one thing to say like, oh, tell me about yourself. It's another thing to say like, tell me about a time you used integrity, or in your integrity show in your last job position.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's not just the time and money, but it's also the emotional cost
Yes.
of doing those things.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, it's so draining.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's. I feel like it's a divorce every time, because we put so much love and
Sure.
work into people. It's sad. Yeah.
Yeah. But when it works, it's great.
When it works, it's great, and
Right.
we have some amazing folks here now.
Yeah. So have you raised any outside capital?
No. Nope. We
It's
own
all organic?
all organic. I mean, I've
Excellent.
used a few PayPal working capital loans,
Yes.
here and there for inventory purchases, which it's been a good fit for us, but everything's been in-house.
How do you think about mentoring, both as being a mentor and have you had people who mentored you? We talked about that a little bit of your military experience,
Right.
where you were in an environment where it just wasn't conducive to that. So how do you think about that?
So right now, we don't have a formal mentorship
Yes.
program. I feel that one of the best things that happened to me was getting pregnant and having my baby a couple of years ago. And I thought that was going to be the worst thing that could ever happen. I looked at, it might be negative, but I always looked at when women had a child and now they're stretched between sort of this business world and then their
They're
family
torn,
world.
right?
They are torn.
Right.
But for me, it was, Nicole, you need to learn to only do the important stuff, because it's really all you have time to do if you want to still be at home with your kid and not work 100 hours a week, which is sort of the magic number I think every entrepreneur goes to. In terms of mentorship, then I was able to see where there were learning gaps for the people that had to backfill those jobs for me. So a really good example right now, Carrie and Amanda, who are my 2 and 3, and I don't tell them which one is 2 and which one is 3. I keep them at bay with that. But in realizing that I need more time to work on, we're doing a spin-off business with the skirts. In order for me to have that time, they need to step up and help me with more of the strategic thinking and more of the long-term planning. Generally, it's just sort of come from me, and then I sort of push it down. I think for us to move to the next place, they need to be part of that
Yes.
You'd be sitting at that table with me. So I've hired a consultant, and we actually do one-on-one training with them on a weekly basis, where we talk about how to just really start to develop that muscle. So for me, that's how our mentorship works, and I think it's been a beautiful process. I mean, Amanda, for example, she's been with me for 4 years. She started in her early 20s. Really, it was her first. We joke about her big girl job. She started with me with a PR background, but again, that attitude, and she was part-time just slinging boxes, and she's now just morphed into this operations manager that deals with inbound exports.
Yes.
And it's through that just process of saying, okay, I'm going to give you the freedom to learn. It's okay to fail. It's okay, and you'll learn from that when we move to the next place.
And that also kind of gives people growth opportunities within a small business, because one of the things
Yes.
people worry about is, if I join this small organization, do I have any growth opportunities?
Right. I always tell people, you're not going to take my job, and your job title might not change, but your job will grow. And it's how you hire into. If you're value driven, you'll find those right people. Carrie, when she started, it was more just I want to say old school pure marketing, and now it's turned into this. Her job is now morphed into this digital manager.
Yes.
Millions of dollars of cash for our budgets. That's the beauty to me of small business. So it's not, you might not get the space in the front, but you get this very robust job, and then, your salary grows with that.
Yeah. Yeah. So clearly you have a culture here that's really important. It's and the culture extends beyond the four walls of the business. It actually extends, and it's part of your brand. It's part of your customer relationship, right? That culture permeates everything. As keeper of the culture, how do you sort of manage that? How do you make sure that it lives on in a way that grows?
Yeah, it's a great question. I going back to the transparency, like learning from that early, like in my early 20s, having that hiccup in my life, and just being transparent with everyone around me. That's how we do it here. So, we had a pretty big business decision with how we were going to handle our logistics for the holidays, and just really bringing the whole group in the office and not doing things behind closed doors, down to our warehouse staff, saying, this is what we're kind of thinking about. This is why we're thinking about it. So we're educating while we do that as well. Again, trying to make people step up to the next place. I don't want to just hire someone for one job. I want to see how we can figure out what their strengths are and build into that. So I think just bringing people into the room and having the weekly stand-up meetings and talking about what's going on and, the State of the Union, that to me it sounds really simple, but I think that's what's helped us.
Right. So as the business grows, that becomes more and more of a challenge. I remember a couple of the companies that I started, on the first day there's four of us and we all had lunch together, so everybody knows what's going on.
Yeah.
And then sometimes when we got to about 10 or 12 people, all of a sudden we all didn't have lunch together anymore.
Right.
And people didn't know what was going on. And then you have to start thinking about other ways of communicating. Have you reached that point yet? How do you think about that?
I don't think we've reached that point quite yet. I do think that environment itself, like the four walls that we're in now, are very important. I know that we moved from a warehouse that was windowless and we got our work done, but it wasn't that great. I think just even the environment that you come into work in, is it clean? Is it fun? What's even up on the walls? What kind of music are you listening to? That all plays into how people just enter into the workplace. I think we've done a fairly good job communicating that this is your home too, even though you're not paying a mortgage here, having respect, and it goes down to your hiring as well. Like those people will share those values too.
Do you have like a regularly scheduled sit down, everyone gets together?
Yes, once a week on Fridays.
Once a week on Fridays.
Yeah.
And that's like an open forum.
It is, yeah. So we have a couple of key topics. We have Safety Steve, who's my husband. His name is Mike. He comes in as Safety Steve with a wig on sometimes, and he does his safety briefings because those can be a little bit dry. So we try to, have a little bit of fun with it. And then we go through just sort of, some top level, this is what's going on behind closed doors, because I don't want it to be like a warehouse staff versus like what's marketing and, what's the management team doing, like bringing everyone together, because I've had so many ideas come off of my warehouse floor saying, hey, we're doing this with the skirts, maybe we can do it this way. That's the environment that I want, because then we're all thinking about the same problems.
Yes. What advice would you give others that are contemplating, starting their own business?
For me, money has always been this sort of underlying, I think for most people, right? Yeah, I didn't have a lot of money. Like, I don't say I didn't have a lot of money growing up, but it was always like, it was a known resource if you didn't have it, right? And saying, okay, I'm going to set off on my own and have my own business. I wanted to make sure I was financially secure to a place where, we saved up a decent nest egg if I had to pull from it, because it just made me feel like I wasn't operating with a gun behind my head. My husband also had a really great job as well. So I was able to be a little bit more experimental. And I think that was very important. If I had $0 in the bank and I started Darn Good Yarn, it wouldn't be a success the way it is today. Just because that fear-based sort of operation in terms of making decisions for your business, if you don't have the cash, it's one thing to be scrappy, don't get me wrong, but you can say, okay, we're going to actually do a substantial test on this marketing, and you can't just put $5 into a boosted post. Like, we're talking maybe $10,000 or something like that, to know that you have that basis.
Yes.
That to me was important, and it helped me make, I think, better decisions. So I think anyone who's on the verge of that, know that for the first 4 years of my business, I worked 2 part-time jobs to make sure I had my own cash coming in, and then I worked hard at night, and I just lay out the budget, like best case scenario, but really plan for the worst case. And I love the idea of being scrappy, and people who have succeeded at this company are just as scrappy as me. Like, we're sitting in my office right now. I'm sitting on a couch that I stole from my living room. My table here has crayon drawings from my kid on it. It's scrappier the better, because then you can make really anything work.
Yes. So I think that's good advice, because in my venture capital days, we often debated what's the right amount of money to invest in a company, right? So you'd see these companies that on day one would raise $20 million.
Wow.
And all of a sudden they have $20 million in the bank, and you can see that they're not scrappy because they feel that they have lots of runway.
Yeah.
And so that's one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is $0. Right. So someplace in that continuum is the right spot.
Yeah.
And so your point of having enough runway to be able to try things and learn, because it's not going to go great every time, is really, really good point. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. And I worked with, and just to add on to that, I worked with a financial planner as well that was really very trusted. I mean, I'm still with her to this day. But they have tools that I don't even realize in terms of budgeting and projections to say, like, okay, like, we're on track, or I need to be putting more money in investments, because one of my aces in the pocket is that I have my own line of credit for the business. And that's like our, if anything really, really went wrong, or sales did go soft for a couple months, which could happen. A Facebook algorithm could change things. And like, okay, you want to make sure you have that. So we did that on purpose so that I can be my own bank, and I'm not giving up equity in the company. So I don't think I'm that sophisticated to have figured that out on my own. So, you hire the professionals when you need them.
Yeah, excellent. So before we wrap this up, are there any other points that you'd like to make, or questions I should have asked you that I didn't?
I think that as a business owner and entrepreneur, I think it's important to always turn over every stone. We get bombarded with a lot of like proposals for other businesses, not in terms of starting other businesses, but just other services like software as a service that are shown to us. And I think in the early days, I thought I was too busy to listen to them. I take almost every demo now, and we schedule it in and figure that out. For me, it's a matter of making sure that we're turning over every stone possible. And even if you wind up not going with a solution that's being presented to you, there's such good opportunities to get educated. Say, okay, these people are thinking about this potential problem this way. Like, is there an application in my business, or should I actually be thinking about this problem in the same way? A great example, back in the day, I didn't really even know what retargeting was. And now it's so much a part of the digital marketing schema. I remember, listening, I think we were on Credio at the time. I think that was and that's who we're with now. But going through and not really understanding, and just not being afraid to ask stupid questions when you're on the call, and figuring out how the technology works, and then saying, okay, I think this is how we could potentially use this. And then learning and having that sort of worked into your infrastructure. You never know sometimes what can really make a big difference in your business.
Right. Well, that's great advice. That's great advice, because as you were saying that, I think lots of times in my past I have, sorry, not interested when the phone rings, right?
Yeah.
And as opposed to saying, I might actually be able to learn something from this engagement that will either help my business or maybe find me a new customer or whatever. So that's great advice. Thank you very much. So Nicole, thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you
so much. Sit down with me and tell us about your wonderful business. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So Bella, that was a really interesting interview with a really interesting person. What was the key takeaways from this interview in your mind?
So the one place I'd like to start is sort of early in her career, where Nicole, I should say early in her college career, actually, where Nicole talked about she was the only one that had a car up at college. This is back when Betta Fish were sort of a big thing going on. And so a bunch of her friends wanted her to drive her to the store to go get some Betta Fish, because all the college kids had Betta Fish for pets in their dorm rooms. And Nicole quickly recognized the opportunity that instead of driving all her friends to do that, she went and bought the Betta Fish, brought them back to the dorm, and then sold them to her friends. So I think this notion of sort of recognizing an opportunity and then being able to act on it was one of the key takeaways that I got.
Agreed. How do you think her military service and her experience as a veteran influenced her development as an entrepreneur, Bela?
Yeah, this was another one, right? So she was part of ROTC in college. And so upon graduation, she went into the Army. What she did in the Army was this contracting and sourcing element. So she got really good at writing contracts. And she said, it wasn't writing contracts, service contracts with General Electric, but a lot of these smaller sort of companies that provide various different goods and services to the Army. So she got really good at sourcing things. She got really good at writing these contracts. And then if you think about her business, right, Darn Good Yarns, all of her suppliers are basically cottage industries. So she's not buying goods from some large factory in China. She's buying her materials and her products from small little cottage industries, many of them made by individuals in their homes. And then she kind of aggregates that stuff together. So I thought this notion of her Army experience really gave her a good skills and insight on sourcing and contract negotiations, which has really been one of the foundational elements of Darn Good Yarns.
Agreed. This notion of aggregation as a business model is really cool because not only is she helping her and her own family out, she's also helping all these small entrepreneurs enable their livelihoods as well, because these small mom and pop operators are oftentimes overlooked when it comes to the ability to open themselves up to new markets and to kind of build a sustainable business on their own. So it's really this two levels of success that she's having, enabling her own success and the success of other entrepreneurs. So yeah, great story.
Yeah, and this notion of the cottage industry and supporting it is also key in how she has built her community around her business. In other words, that's part of the reason why people like to buy products from Darn Good Yarns, is because they know they're supporting individuals who are often in impoverished situations, and you're supporting their livelihood. So you're not buying this product from some large factory owned and run by a billionaire, but you're actually buying these products that are sourced by various different individuals in very poor parts of the world that are making these products. And that's part of the identity that she has built around her business.
Yeah, I love it. This concept of identity is linked to this built community that you talked about in the open, and this idea of trust that I think we're seeing here. Yeah,
absolutely. So she has built this devoted community of customers around her business. And, that light for me went on when two things happened when I was walking around her warehouse. I saw this big bin full of various different scarves of all different colors. And they're all different because each one is fundamentally handmade and it's unique. These are not printed on a printing press. And so I asked Nicole, I says, how does someone order one of these online? I mean, how do I look at the color and the pattern and decide which one I want? You have to take pictures of all these things? And she goes, oh, no. We just basically say, tell us the sort of one or two colors you want in it, and we pick it for you. So in other words, when you get online, you say, I want something with some, bold greens in it, or I want something with earth tones. And then when we fill that order, we'll pick out one that has earth tones in it and we'll send you. So number one, in order for a customer to buy something like that, you have to have this trust. You really need to trust that, you're going to get something that you want. You have to sort of believe in what's going on. And then I think the other unique part of it is there's this little surprise, right? There's this anticipation. It's like getting a present for the holidays or your birthday. It's like, what is it? What is it? I know the person that gave me this, understands my taste and I really like them. So it's going to be a wonderful surprise. So I think that's another key thing that she's been able to build in her business, which is really unique.
Yeah, and I think this is something that listeners who might be interested in starting a business could look at. I think there's lots of other product lines and kind of industry sub areas that would be open to a business model like this. And again, I think a lot of this is Nicole's interpersonal skills that allows her to pull this off and her experience as we were discussing. But I think this is things that people without a ton of business experience could look at and do. Anything where you can handcraft or homecraft something, or even small manufacturing businesses and aggregate things that are unique together, build trust, build a community, build a two-way conversation, and then go for a subscription model, I think is something that's replicable.
Yeah, and this notion of community and trust, Nicole has successfully built not just only with her customers, but also with the individuals who work at Darn Good Yarns. When I walked around there, it was very clear. It didn't feel like I was walking around a business. It felt like I was walking around someone's house. People were interacting like much more so like they're a big family. Sort of the decor was much more, home-like and house-like. There was a couple dogs, and it just sort of was in really stark contrast to some other organizations that I've, seen in my career that are very, very sort of business-like. And so this notion of this community and trust permeates not just her customers, but also with her employees. And she was telling me this story about, I think this was off the mic, she was telling me this story about, well, her business to some extent is fairly seasonal. And so there have these big pushes, during the holidays. And she said there's never a problem with people coming in to work on weekends. And everyone's out in the warehouse packing boxes and making sure stuff gets shipped out. So this notion of trust, community is not important just for your customers, but also can be very important to the core foundation of your business and your employees and your ability to be successful in that business.
Neat. And, don't forget the suppliers and all this too. So now we have this element of trust. She's helping these small suppliers and building trust. She has trust within her own organization with her own employees, and then she's built this trust with her customers. So now we have these three different levels of the organization, and pretty much all the key stakeholders are bound with this trust that she's developed. So I think this is a cool takeaway for listeners.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's of all the businesses that I've seen in my career, this represents a very small percentage of people who've been able to do this and make it a core element of their business. And I will say that I reflect back on the ones that I've come across in my life, they've all been very successful.
Great. Any last thoughts?
I think that covers the real important stuff that I was sort of thinking about when I was re-listening to the interview with her and getting ready to put down these comments. So I think we hit all the big points. Mike, how about you?
Yeah, I'm great. Let's call it a wrap.
All right. Excellent. Again, we'd like to thank Clarkson University and Munster University for their support. If you like what you hear, please give us a favorable review at iTunes. We're looking to build our listenership, and that's the best way to do it. And again, if you have any comments or suggestions, please feel free to send us an email at bela.and.mike@gmail.com. So till our next episode, see you later.